that visual knowledge gained from photography cannot but have an effect on American attitudes toward war. Photography is the way in which most of us have experienced war. To study war and to admit an investigation of war photography is to refuse to factor into the military and political equation of war the cultural expression of war that the majority of Americans have shared. Susan D. Moeller. Photography in World War I. There were three types of war photography: military, historical, and educational. Military photography was employed in reconnaissance. It helped to obtain information about the forces' dispositions and conditions in and behind enemy lines. In order to observe this, photographers would either take pictures from the air, crawl into no man's land, or hide in trees or other tall landmarks. They also took photos from planes and balloons. In order to train photographers, the United States set up two schools. One was at Columbia University for land photography, and another was in Rochester, New York for aerial photography. There were 92 officers and 498 enlisted men in the Signal Corps photographic section by the end of the war. Aerial photography was a huge advantage in developing wartime strategy. In this military science, there were huge advances. In 1914, the greatest height for photography was 3,000 feet, but with the creation of accurate anti-aircraft guns, there was a push for higher altitudes. In 1915, it was increased to 6,000 feet. In 1916, it was increased to 15,000 feet, and by 1918, it was increased to 20,000 feet. While the photographers were still in the sky, they were able to put the exposed plates in a daylight developing tank, and then fix and rinse them. Once on the ground again, a messenger could take these wet negatives to a dark room. After the prints were developed, they could be delivered to the commanding officer. Alternatively, the exposed plates could be dropped to the ground by parachute for development. These systems were able to quickly aid an officer who was organizing an attack across enemy lines. Another type of aerial photography involved attaching cameras to pigeons. The birds carried a camera that weighed 70 grams and took automatic exposures every 30 seconds. A third type of aerial photography involved the use of kites. It was hugely developed in France pre-war by Arthur Batut and Emily Wentz.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me, every son of liberty. Hurry right away, no delay, go today. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to pine, to be proud her boys in line. Over there, over there, over there, over there. Send the word over there. 'Cause the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drum coming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there. Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Johnny, show the Hun you're a son of a gun.
The historical type of photography was to capture what happened during World War I from America's view. One of the most important things that photography documented was why soldiers died. Photographers had to affirm and proclaim the worthiness of American deaths. They had to show that every soldier that had died for democracy. This was to shape American attitudes of war toward the belief that it was sweet to die for one's country and that this war was one worth the sacrifice. The educational photography seems to be censored for public view. The pictures published often belittled the horrors of war. It made the citizens believe the war wasn't so bad. Pictures of the enemy, mangled and dead, were often shown to persuade the Americans to hate them. Photographs of the German and Austrian dead aided to reinforce the idea that the enemy was not only killable, but also defeatable. These tactics give the American people a false sense of what was happening. Up until 1918, press photographers had to communicate with the Committee on Public Information and Chief Photographic Censor Joe T. Marshall. Then a new photography subdivision was established to handle censoring and captioning of official war photos. The types of photos that were censored were photographs that indicated troop movements or showed any symbol of an identifiable uniform or locale. Also, photographs that displayed technical or tactical inventions were also censored. All of this was to prevent the enemy from obtaining specific information about the American forces. Other forbidden photographs were ones that showed soldiers improperly equipped or in an improper environment. Some photographs, such as the mangled remains of a fallen plane, the wreck of a war vessel, and trenches of dead American troops, had depressing effects on families of men at war. As a result, official pictures of American dead, mutilations, and accidents were usually withheld from publication in order to keep up morale and support for the war.
War was the first conflict in history in which aerial photography played a significant part. Royal Flying Corps observers wielding cumbersome equipment in flimsy biplanes risked their lives to take pictures thousands of feet up. They allowed Allied generals to compile maps of the enemy trench networks and modern historians to gauge the devastation wreaked on the once peaceful towns and countryside of France and Belgium. Nick Hyam, BBC News.